I sat frozen on the witness stand, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I glanced up at the judge's bench and saw his eyes narrow as the courtroom air seemed to thicken. How could he paint me as some threat, when all I'd ever done was protect my daughter? I clasped the edge of the stand, feeling the smooth wood dig into my trembling fingers. The gallery behind me fell silent, every pair of eyes drilling into my back. Then my ex-spouse leaned forward, a smug crease at the corner of his mouth, and repeated his warning. "Your Honor, she's unstable. She's dangerous." I swallowed, fighting the lump in my throat. The next words out of his mouth would decide my fate and my child's future. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted through the tall courtroom windows, casting long shadows over the polished floor. I wondered if the judge saw me in that shadow, if he believed the threat rather than the frightened mother pleading for justice. And then my lawyer stood, a slim folder in hand, and strode forward with a calm I could barely remember feeling. What secret did he hold that could turn this moment on its head? I remember the morning sun slipping through the slats of my blinds, painting golden stripes across my bedroom floor. I'm Maya Torres, a single mother and freelance graphic designer. I wake early, always have, because I need those quiet hours before my daughter Sophia stirs. I press my forehead against the cool window pane and breathe in the calm. This is my world, I think, safe and predictable. I brew a strong coffee in my cramped kitchen and plate 2 pancakes, one for me, one for Sophia. I arrange them on bright yellow plates, just like she likes. I slip on my worn cardigan and listen for her small footsteps on the hardwood. She appears at the doorway, hair in a messy ponytail, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. I greet her with a smile so wide it feels like sunshine. Then I scoop her into my arms and spin her around, her giggles like music in the room. I work from home, my laptop open on the dining table. I juggle client logos, social media banners, and deadlines like a performer twirling plates. I love the flexibility, being there when Sophia needs help with homework, cheering her on at her dance recitals, tucking her in with a bedtime story. Our small apartment smells of vanilla-scented candles and home-baked cookies. And then, life feels perfect. Met Carlos at a gallery opening 5 years ago. He was charming, with a quick grin and a passion for photography that matched my own love for art. I fell for him the way you fall for sunshine after months of rain. We married in a small ceremony under an oak tree. But after Sophia was born, the light in his eyes began to dim. I thought it was the stress of fatherhood, until the criticism began. It started subtly. I remember him saying, "Your designs are too whimsical," as if my creativity were a flaw. He'd sigh when Sophia clung to me, calling our bond smothering. I convinced myself I was being overly sensitive. "He's just stressed," I whispered to myself. "It'll pass." Our apartment, once filled with laughter, began to echo with his quiet disapproval. I rearranged my work hours to avoid his sharp looks. And then, I convinced myself I was keeping the peace. My sister Elena noticed the change first. She'd call me on Sundays and ask, "Are you okay? You sound tired." I'd brush it off, telling her work was busy and Sophia kept me up. But she pressed, saying, "I worry for you, Maya." I hated that she saw my cracks. "I'm fine," I lied, because admitting the truth felt like betrayal. By the time we separated, I thought the worst was behind me. I moved into this apartment, found a quieter client roster, and tried to rebuild. I instituted a bedtime ritual. Warm milk, soft lullabies, and whispered, "I love you," as I watched Sophia drift to sleep. I held on to those moments like lifelines. And then, my ex's calls started. First polite, then demanding, until his tone turned cold. I remember the day he filed for custody. I woke to an email titled, Notice of Petition. My hands shook as I read the pages. He accused me of instability, pointed to my late invoices as irresponsibility. I stared at the document, the edges crisp with legal weight. My heart felt crushed under its words. This can't be happening, I choked out. That afternoon, I sat in my favorite armchair, cradling Sophia's rabbit and sobbing into its fur. I felt small, powerless. And then, I resolved. I would fight. I would show the court the truth of our life together, the laughter, the love, the care. I would prove I was the stable anchor Sophia needed. As I closed my laptop, the sun dipped, below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room. I glanced at Sophia, asleep on the couch, and swore I would protect her at any cost. But the path ahead felt like walking through a storm with no map. How could I prepare for a battle I'd never wanted? I arrived at the courthouse that morning, feeling a knot of dread tighten in my chest. I stepped through the heavy wooden doors and into a corridor of echoes, footsteps, distant murmurs, the soft hum of fluorescent lights. I pressed my hand against the cool stone wall, reminding myself, you can do this for Sophia. I sat in the waiting area, clutching the folder of evidence I'd spent weeks assembling. Bank statements, school records, photos of birthday parties, notes from Sophia's teacher. I watched families filing in, lawyers in sharp suits, court clerks stacking files like dominoes. My palms were slick with sweat. My heart pounded so loudly I felt it in my throat. And then, his presence loomed. He appeared flanked by his new attorney, Ms. Kavanaugh, tall, impeccable in navy wool, her heels clicking like a metronome of intimidation. I watched him hover behind her, arms crossed, chin lifted in challenge. He offered no greeting, just that same cold smile. I felt my stomach drop. In the days before, I'd noticed little shifts whenever I spoke to him. I'd suggest a pickup, time for Sophia, and he'd tut. You know you're always late, right? Even when I arrived 15 minutes early, I felt the weight of his judgment. I began questioning my own memory. Was I late? I'd check my phone logs, only to find I'd been early. Maybe I forgot, I thought, for her sake. I stepped into the courtroom when my name was called. The judge's bench rose like a fortress before me, its carved wood ominous in the harsh light. I held my head high but trembled on my feet. Ms. Kavanaugh rose first, her voice clear and clipped. Your Honor, we contend the petitioner has exhibited a pattern of irresponsible behavior, including late payments and erratic work schedules. She waved a printout. These bank transfers show inconsistent deposits to child support accounts. I felt my cheeks burn. I'd included those bank statements in my evidence. Every transfer highlighted, every invoice dated. But she twisted them. Notice the gaps, she said, pointing at months where the total fell short. This demonstrates a lack of financial responsibility. I spoke up, voice quivering. Your Honor, those gaps correspond to medical bills. After Sophia's ear infection, I provided copies of the hospital receipts. I thrust my folder forward. The judge peered over his glasses. I watched his eyes flit to Ms. Kavanaugh's eyebrows arching. Her next words were soft, almost conspiratorial. Objection. Hearsay. I'm stunned. Hearsay? I thought. These are receipts. My mind reeled as the judge nodded and sustained. The folder stayed on my lap, unopened. I felt a tremor in my fingertips. Outside, the courtroom later, I replayed it in my head like a broken record. She'd dismissed my proof with a flick. I walked the halls, pressing my forehead to the cool marble. How can facts be hearsay? What hope do I have if the system bends like this? And then the text came through. Sophia needs her asthma inhaler. My chest tightened. I sprinted to her after-school program across the street, I burst into the bright playroom where she sat coloring. She looked up, eyes wide. "Mama?" She hopped off her chair. I scooped her into my arms, inhaler clutched in my pocket. I dosed her, holding her small shoulders, breath trembling. Later, that night, we lay in bed, the lamps glow soft on the walls. I brushed her hair and asked, "What was your favorite part of today?" She yawned. "When you picked me up," she whispered. I was scared without my inhaler. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. He nearly left her without it, I thought, just to make a point. And then, at dinner the next day, Ms. Kavanaugh cornered me in the hallway as I handed Sophia her plate of macaroni. "Ms. Torres," she said sweetly, "your client seems very anxious. Has she considered therapy?" Her smile was thin. I bristled. "I'm quite capable of managing my anxiety." She tilted her head. "It's for Sophia's sake, of course. Stability." I'd heard the implication loud and clear. She's planting doubt in the judge's mind, suggesting I'm unstable. That night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the air conditioner. I pressed my hand against my heart, feeling the rapid flutters. I can't let them win. I opened my laptop and drafted a new affidavit. Detailed account of every dinner I'd cooked, every bedtime story, every school project I'd helped with. I saved it under Defense Final V2 PDF. And then, something else caught my eye. An email from Felipe, my tech-savvy friend. "I found something you need to see," it read. "Meet me tomorrow at the cafe." I stared at the words, pulse accelerating. What had he uncovered? And could it finally turn the tide in the courtroom? I arrived at the corner cafe just as the morning light slanted through the windows, turning the dust motes in the air to golden sparkles. I pulled the door open, the jingle above me sounding like a warning bell. I scanned the mismatched tables, until I spotted Felipe hunched over his laptop, fingers dancing across the keyboard. His eyes were sharp, his jaw set. I slid into the seat opposite him, heart hammering so loudly I feared it might crack my ribs. "I found something," he whispered, voice low. He pushed the laptop toward me. I blinked as a bank ledger glowed on the screen, my ex's account activity labeled, "Transfer to Emergency Fund." I frowned. "This is mine," I said. "I paid into that fund for Sophia's medical expenses." Felipe tapped a column. "Look closer." I leaned in. There it was, recurring transfers, every month on the 10th, pulling funds from an account in my name. But the destination account wasn't Sophia's medical fund. It was a private trust under a shell company, MV Holdings. I felt bile rise in my throat. He set me up. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the laptop. "Why?" I managed. Felipe's gaze was grave. "He manipulated the records. He used your signature stamp." I remembered the pile of documents he'd made me sign during our separation. Custody forms, financial affidavits. I'd trusted him to file them properly. I'd never suspected. I stood abruptly, drawing stares from other patrons. Felipe grabbed my arm. "Calm down." I exhaled shakily. "I have to get to the courthouse." Later, I strode through those same echoing halls, my folder swollen with this explosive proof. I replayed the moment I'd first seen the ledger, Felipe's finger tracing the fake transfers, and felt a fierce surge of clarity. This is it. Inside the courtroom, I took my place at the defense table. Judge Rowland peered down over his glasses. I fought to steady my racing pulse. Ms. Kavanaugh sat across from me. Her lips curved in that infuriating smirk, as if she knew some secret I had yet to reveal. "Your Honor," Ms. Kavanaugh began, "we request the court deny this new evidence, as untimely and beyond the scope of Ms. Torres's previous filings." Her voice was silk over steel. I squeezed my folder, the pages crisp with truth. I stood. My throat was dry, but my voice came out strong. Your Honor, this ledger proves my ex-spouse deliberately falsified documents to portray me as financially unstable. I laid the printouts on the desk. These transfers were never for Sophia's medical care. They were stolen from me. Stolen. To frame me. The judge's eyes narrowed. He gestured for silence as he reviewed the pages. The room held its breath. I held mine. Then, Ms. Kavanaugh rose, her tone clipped. Objection, Your Honor. We have no way to verify the authenticity of these documents. I looked to Felipe, who sat in the back row. He gave me a slight nod and pressed play on his phone. A hush fell as the scratched video began. Security footage from our apartment complex lobby, time-stamped 3 months earlier. I watched myself sign what I'd believed were routine custody forms. Then the camera panned, revealing my ex there, beside me, with a stamp pad and my signature stamp, pressing down on blank pages. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I felt tears sting my eyes. Relief, vindication, fury all tangled into one. Judge Rowland leaned forward. Mr. Castillo, he said, his voice the crack of a gavel. Would you care to explain? Ms. Kavanaugh stuttered, her composure fracturing. My ex rose, face pale. I watched his lips part, ready to speak. Instead, he sank back into his seat, eyes fixed on the floor. I felt a hot spark of triumph bloom in my chest. Then, the judge rapped his gavel. I jumped, my heart thudding. The courtroom descended into whispers. This evidence is both authenticated and highly relevant, Judge Rowland declared. I will allow it. A tremor ran through me, and I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. I glanced at Sophia's empty chair beside mine. She needs to know her mama never gave up. I returned to my seat as Felipe slipped me a tissue. My hands were finally still. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. And then, the judge paused, lifting his gaze slowly to Ms. Kavanaugh. What will his next ruling be? And will it finally secure Sophia's future? I watched the courtroom hush as the judge's gavel echoed, 3 sharp knocks sealing a moment I'd dreamed of. I am Maya Torres, and this is the moment everything changes. I rose, every nerve alight, ready to confront the truth head-on, Mr. Castillo? Judge Rowland's voice filled the room. You stand accused of fabricating financial records and obstructing justice. How do you plead? I saw his face pale under the courtroom lights. His shoulders hunched, and he swallowed hard. Instead of answering, he cocked his head toward Ms. Kavanaugh. What is this? His voice wavered. She stood, fumbling, with her notes. Your Honor, this evidence... Ms. Kavanaugh, the judge cut her off, eyes stern. You vouched for the authenticity of those statements, yet here we have incontrovertible proof of forgery. He turned to me. Ms. Torres, you may continue. I closed my eyes, steeling my resolve. When I spoke again, my voice was steady, every word deliberate. Your Honor, this forged ledger was the centerpiece of the defense's argument against my character. I paused, glancing at Felipe in the gallery. He nodded, hands clasped as if in prayer. My daughter's well-being was put at risk because he sought to demonize me. The judge leaned forward, fingers steepled. I felt the gaze of every person in the room bearing down on me. Reporters in the gallery, my lawyer at my side, even the bailiff's helmeted nod. Ms. Torres, he said softly, how did you discover the forgery? I recounted the cafe, meeting, Felipe's discovery of the shell account, the pattern of transfers, the video footage of the signature stamp. I described how my pulse raced when I realized my innocence could be proven, how I sprinted back to the courthouse clutching truth in my hands. My voice caught when I spoke of Sophia's nights without her inhaler, and how my ex used every legal trick to twist that moment into irresponsibility. When I finished, the room was silent, but for the judge's steady breathing. He tapped, his pen against his desk. I watched ink ripple across the page as he took notes. Then, the door at the rear of the courtroom creaked open. A courtroom officer stepped forward, hand extended, carrying an envelope. The judge took it, breaking the seal. His brows furrowed as he scanned the contents. I held my breath, pulse throbbing in my temples. The judge's gaze lifted to the bailiff. "Please fetch Ms. Torres's lawyer and Mr. Castillo." My lawyer, Mr. Peters, rose and approached. I watched as the bailiff escorted my ex-spouse to the bench. The tension was electric. The judge cleared his throat. "It appears there is additional correspondence between Mr. Castillo and an associate at the shell company, detailing instructions to frame Ms. Torres. This message was recently authenticated by our forensic team." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I felt tears prick my eyes. Relief mingled with vindication. My lawyer placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Judge Rowland looked directly at my ex. "Mr. Castillo, your actions amount to contempt of court and fraud. I will be referring these charges to the district attorney. As for the custody petition," he paused, letting the words hang. "It is hereby dismissed. Ms. Torres retains full custody of her daughter, with no visitation granted. Until further review." A collective gasp filled the room. I felt my legs weaken. I gripped the edge of my chair, white-knuckled, as sobs threatened to break free. When I spoke, it was a whisper. "Thank you." Then the judge's gavel fell once more. I jumped. The sound reverberated through the vaulted ceiling. I felt my doubts shatter like glass. My lawyer exhaled, shoulders slumping with relief. He turned to me, eyes shining. "You did it, Maya." I closed my eyes, tears spilling over. I remembered Sophia's tiny hand in mine that morning, her trust fueling every step I'd taken. We made it, I thought. We made it together. And then, as the courtroom emptied and the late afternoon light slanted through the windows, I realized this victory was only the beginning. What challenges lie ahead now that the judge has ruled, and how will I rebuild our lives in the aftermath? I felt the courtroom dissolve around me as the judge's words sank in. Full custody granted, visitation suspended, fraud charges referred. My knees trembled so fiercely I thought they might buckle. I clasped the edge of the defense table, my knuckles whitening as though gripping reality itself. This is real. This is happening. Then, the hush broke into distant applause. Soft at first, then growing as my lawyer, Mr. Peters, exchanged relieved nods with the bailiff. I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I was holding. The weight pressing on my chest lifted in a rush of air, filling my lungs with relief so deep it made me dizzy. I closed my eyes, tasting tears of triumph on my lashes. The judge's gavel fell one last time. I jumped, startled by its finality. I stiffened, waiting for the next words. But the moment was complete. The verdict was delivered. I felt tears slip free down my cheeks. They're for Sophia. They're for me. And then, the bailiff approached with a small, worn wooden gavel, placing it in my hand. "For your courage," he said quietly. I blinked in surprise at the gesture, the polished wood cool against my palm. I earned this. I rose from my chair. Every eye in the courtroom seemed fixed on me. The judge's stern nod, the attorney's respectful silence, even the court reporter pausing her pen mid-sentence. I stood tall, though my heart still pounded like tribal drums. I took a step forward and felt the sheen of the polished floor under my shoes, the echo of my movement resonating in the vaulted ceiling. I looked across at Sophia's empty seat, where she had watched every moment, her tiny hands gripping the armrests, her eyes shining with pride. She believed in me, I remembered. She trusted me. My throat caught as I realized the greatest victory was not the legal win, but reclaiming her sense of safety. When I spoke, my voice trembled, but carried. "Thank you, Your Honor." I paused, searching his face for compassion. The judge's stern features softened for the first time. He inclined his head. "Ms. Torres, you've demonstrated remarkable perseverance and love." I bowed my head briefly. Then, as the courtroom began to empty, I turned toward my lawyer. He approached, placing a steadying hand on my back. "You did it," he whispered. I dared a smile so fragile it felt like a whisper in a storm. My emotions roared: exhilaration, exhaustion, disbelief. I felt every muscle unwind as though released from a vice. The tightness in my shoulders melted, my breathing slowed, and the tears came again, this time of pure joy. I can breathe again. Outside the courtroom, sunlight flooded the marble foyer. I stepped into the brightness and blinked against the glare. The world felt unbearably vivid. The gold trim on the columns, the polished banisters gleaming, the murmur of visitors in the hall. I inhaled, letting the warmth fill me. My phone buzzed with messages. Elena's video call, Felipe's celebratory "we did it." Texts, my ex-husband's attorney requesting a private meeting. I switched off the notifications, savoring the moment of peace. One thing at a time, I promised myself. First, Sophia. And then, I pictured her small face when I told her. Her surprise, her tearful hug, the way she'd press her cheek to mine. I felt a soaring joy at the thought. She's mine, and I'm hers. That evening, back in our sunlit apartment, I gathered Sophia in my arms on the couch. The late light painted, her hair like spun gold. I told her everything, how scary it was, how hard I fought, how nothing could tear us apart. She listened, eyes wide, then slipped her arms around my neck and whispered, "I knew you'd win, Mama." I pressed a kiss to her forehead, feeling her heartbeat against mine. This is our new beginning. And then, as I tucked her into bed, I felt a quiet determination stir within me. The nightmare was over, but our story was just beginning. I would rebuild our life on solid ground, our laughter filling these rooms again. I learned that truth doesn't need permission. I learned that when voices rise against you, your own voice, steady, persistent, unwavering, can be the most powerful weapon. I remember each moment of doubt, each tremor of fear, and how every time I whispered to myself, "I can't," I chose instead to prove, "I can." I realized that love for my child was more than motivation. It was a force that turned fear into action, silence into testimony, shadows into light. I understood that the courtroom's walls couldn't contain the bond between a mother and her daughter. I felt it when Sophia clutched my hand in the gallery, and I felt it again when the judge looked at me and saw not a danger, but a defender. Then, I vowed to stand up for every parent silenced by accusation. Then, I vowed to teach Sophia that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward anyway. Then, I vowed to carry this lesson into every day, because life will always test you, but you decide whether to fall or rise. I share this story with you because someone told me once, keep your head down, don't rock the boat. I say now, rock the boat. I say now, speak up. I say now, share your truth. If you've ever felt unheard, if you've ever fought for someone you love, you're not alone. I invite you to join our journey. I invite you to like this video if you believe in the power of truth. I invite you to share this story with anyone who needs courage. I invite you to comment below, tell me your story, and let's lift each other up. I invite you to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a moment of hope and resilience. I promise, when you stand up for what's right, the world will listen. I sit here now, the courtroom lights dimmed in my memory, but still burning bright in my heart. I feel the weight of every breath I've taken on this journey, and the promise of every breath still to come. I hope my story reminds you that you are stronger than any doubt cast your way. If you found strength in my fight, please give this video a thumbs up. If you believe in the power of speaking your truth, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I'll be sharing more stories of hope, resilience, and justice. And if you've ever faced a moment when the world told you to stay silent, share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community that listens, supports, and stands together. Thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm Maya Torres, never afraid to speak up.